Hello and good day, Mike Adcock with an update on Typhoon Nari, going by the Philippine name Santi in the Western Pacific. This brief is based on the 9 Zulu JMA advisory package from the 11th of October. Taking a look at satellite image, you can see Nari approaching eastern Luzon at 9 Zulu. The center was positioned about 215 kilometers east-southeast of Baler, or about 285 kilometers east-northeast of Manila. Winds are 75 knots sustained, gusting up to 105, and it is moving to the west at 9 knots. Pressure 965 hectopascal. Do want to emphasize here, looking at Dvorak, this may be a little conservative of a wind speed, 75 knots, maybe more on the edge of 90 to 100. More on that here in a bit. One thing we have noticed is the pinhole eye has disappeared. That's thanks to some shear helping to expand the central dense overcast. Again, with that shear helping to influence some westerly outflow, and that's about 10 to 20 knots of easterly shear that we're monitoring over Nari. Do have public storm warning signals out. Here in yellow is signal 1, orange signal 2, and red is signal 3. Do want to emphasize though, while Metro Manila is under signal 2 for the most part, don't get complacent with this storm. Much of the winds will be on the north side. Some very strong gusts though, as well as heavy rains may be battering portions of Metro Manila, especially depending on the track, but this track looks like it may be shifting a little south of the Bagasa track, which is streamlining these public signals. So continue to monitor the progress of Nari and of your local meteorological agency overnight and into the weekend as Nari approaches. Alright, taking a look at the Western Pacific satellite loop here, kind of give you an idea of what's going on. Do have a area or a cold front clipping through Japan, flanked by either side by areas of high pressure. These areas of high pressure very strong, and it is keeping Nari moving in a due westerly direction. May see a little jog off to the northwest as it crosses the South China Sea in response to a weak trough of low pressure. And here's the JMA surface analysis, kind of showing that, again, the high pressure's off to the north, keeping it pretty solid for that westerly trajectory. Here's let's go ahead and take a look at some of the track forecasts. Here's JMA's track, again, looking for landfall in and around Dingalan, or on the northern part of Dingalan Bay, just south of Baler. Much of the agencies is putting it right in this region, so we'll continue to monitor it. Of course, the further south this slides, that does put Metro Manila under the gun. So again, folks in Metro Manila, continue to monitor the progress of this system. May see some further intensification prior to landfall. Of course, as it crosses Luzon, should see some weakening there, and then regaining typhoon strength, pretty much getting it back to where it is currently as it crosses the South China Sea. Again, taking a look at some of the agencies around the Western Pacific here. Bagasa, a little bit further north, and they actually have it more of a northwest or slight northerly track, and bringing it closer to Baler. I think that might be a shade further north than it needs to be. Again, continuing to monitor this, but anything further south of this line does increase the risk for Metro Manila. Taking a look at some of the other agencies, this is the Vietnam's Hydrometeorological Agency. Right now the forecast is along the southern end of the Baler Bay. Pretty much, again, all these agencies are between the Dingalan Bay and the Baler Bays, continuing in a westerly track. Here's Taiwan's Central Weather Bureau. Again, pretty much the same solution. You can see this slight northwestward jog as it approaches Vietnam. Here's China's Meteorological Agency. This is a little bit older of a forecast, quite a bit further north. I think this is quite a bit further north anyway. Here's Hong Kong's observatories track. This one's rather north as well, does take it right through the Balair Bay. Here's Thailand's Thailand Meteorological Department, again in and around the Balair area. And Joint Typhoon Warning Center. They're placing it a little bit further south, closer to JMA's forecast. And of course, I want to point out again this little slight northward jog as it approaches Vietnam. Way appears to be under the gun there in Vietnam. And this pretty much matches up with the track guidance, again, in and around the Balair Bay area, or maybe just south of that, and then again in and around the Hue area in Vietnam. Not seeing a whole lot more intensification at this point. Should see some good, some rather rapid weakening as it crosses Luzon. Then once it re-emerges in the South China Sea, again should regain typhoon strength prior to making landfall again in Vietnam. Alright, I mentioned the Dvorak earlier. JMA is going rather conservative, going with a T4.5, which lended them their 75 knot initial intensity. The American agencies, NESDIS as well as the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, are both going with a 5.0, or 5.5 rather, which would yield 100 knots. That's a full point off, so that's a pretty significant difference. That's basically 1 day's worth of intensification. Interestingly enough, though, the objective Dvorak technique does place it pretty much in the middle at a 5.0, which would be about 90 knots. So the American agencies, NESDIS as well as JTWC, they're basing their intensities on the very large central dense overcast of about 200 nautical miles. That would get you a data T of 5.0, which yields to the ADT reading there. Both agencies also added a half of a point based on a banding feature here to the south. Kind of seems a little weak. I don't know if I would have given it that half point, but nonetheless, Category 2 may be flirting with Category 3 equivalent if you're using the Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale. Looking at radar here, you're starting to see it, the eye of it starting to poke up on radar here. Water temperatures, of course, in the interims still rather favorable, in the upper 20s, 28, 29 degrees Celsius, and then again in the South China Sea, no concerns there. Looking up at our upper air, you can see the strong westerly winds here in the upper levels, about 20-30 knots. That's helping to influence the westerly outflow. None much to note here in the lower levels. And then taking a look at our shear, again looking at about 10 to 20 knots of shear in and around the system, and should be dealing with that as it traverses the South China Sea. Again, we're talking about the winds here that's going to be battering parts of central Luzon and in and around the Manila area. Do want to emphasize, though, in addition to high winds, heavy rainfall will be another factor. Looking for Aurora province, let's see here, Aurora, some of the surrounding provinces here, 4 to 8 inches of rainfall. That's about 100 to 200 millimeters of rainfall. Starting to taper off if you get as you go along. Still pretty good significant amounts of rain, about 25 millimeters in and around the Manila area. This may be underdoing it a little bit. Of course, the track shifts a little bit further to the south. That will increase the rainfall in Metro Manila, especially in the northern areas as you get toward Angeles City. So definitely keep an eye on that. Here's some surface plots. You've already seen the conditions worsen in Balair. About 2.5 kilometer visibility there, 4 mile or 4 2.5 mile visibility, or about 4 kilometers there as the system approaches. Matter of fact, let's take a look at Balir. This is at 10 Zulu. Moderate rain already fallen there. Westerly winds at 27 knots. 4 kilometer visibility again. And the pressure is starting to fall at a pretty rapid rate, 994.8 hectopascal. So we'll continue to monitor the progress of the storm as it approaches Luzon. Of course, you can follow up at westernpacificweather.com. We'll be posting as well on the Facebook and Twitter, so you can monitor that. You can also join in on the conversation at storm2k.org. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Have a great day, be safe, and take care.